Okay, good afternoon everybody. It's Tuesday, 13th of December. My name's Alan Cowie. I'm from the new Anglia Growth Hub. We provide free support for businesses in Norfolk and Suffolk. Thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. Should have Nick Davies on the line. Can you hear me okay, Nick?
I certainly can, Alan.
Good
Good
stuff.
afternoon, everybody.
We'll come to you in just a moment. This webinar is in association with Barclays. It's the last in the series as well. So if this was TV, this is where you'd all go, oh, but fear not, because we will be back next year. If you do want to watch some of the other webinars that we've covered on business planning, lending, intellectual property, grants and HR, it's all online, newangliagrowthhub.co.uk. So on the screen you can see who's who, looking very festive as well, and I'm sure Nick's got some treats for you all as well today. So we're going to be talking about cybersecurity. It's a major issue. We've seen a number of big hitters. There's been a lot of press this year. Big companies falling victim to hackers, Tesco Bank, TalkTalk, Yahoo, to just name a few. It's very much small businesses which I think appear to be the latest target for fraudsters. Just want to kick off with a quick poll actually. So have you personally, or has your business ever been a victim of cybercrime? Have you personally or your business ever been a victim of cybercrime? If you'd like to go ahead and vote, vote now. So, just give you one more chance. Oh, that's okay. It's about 50-50, which is interesting. How does that tally up with your research, Nick?
It's more or less the same. In fact, maybe a little bit more than that. So I've spoken to over 250 businesses so far, and I've seen well over 50% being hit one way or another, depending on whether it's opened up a a phishing email to something like a ransomware attack. So it is really, really high.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it rising all the time as well.
Well, according to the e-invoicing firm Tungsten, who conducted a survey of 1,000 firms, they're saying that invoice fraud is costing SMEs about £9 billion every year. Around half of businesses have actually received a fraudulent invoice. Meanwhile, social media is also posing a threat to cybersecurity. 1 in 5 employees admitting to connecting with strangers on LinkedIn, and of course that information can be used, and fraudsters can launch things like spear phishing attacks. But we've heard all the terms: malware, spyware, phishing, viruses, and worms. But what does it all mean? Nick, it's over to you.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, Alan. And hello everybody, and thanks for joining me today. So I'm going to be talking about an introduction to cybersecurity, and I'm going to go off a few little areas, but let me give you a bit of background about myself first of all. So I've been with Barclays now for the last 8.5 years. So my background with Barclays is that I'm one of the digital eagles here, and that might not mean a lot to yourselves, but it means that we try and educate as many people as possible about anything to do with anything on the digital space. So we teach staff, we teach personal customers, and we teach business customers, and that's where my expertise comes in. So my background is in online presence, social media, websites, search engine optimization, and especially cybersecurity. So this is a major thing, especially within the bank, and especially with businesses out there as well. So we're going to cover off a little bit today around cybersecurity. We're going to break it down into 3 main areas. So the presentation really is all about educating yourself and your business around cybercrime. So we're going to walk you through a bit of a journey, and we're going to look at the impact of crime on businesses. We're going to look at the methods and mindset of cyber criminal, the tactics they actually go through to commit the cyber crime, and also ways of being able to reduce your own risk against cyber fraud as well. So as Alan rightly said, in the news recently, cybersecurity has been out there quite a lot, in terms of cyber attacks. So the fact that the government have recently released £1.8 billion to try and tackle cyber hacking, cyber security pitfalls. And as you can see from the stats on screen there, these are massive stats. Okay, it's increased at such a huge rate. We live in an increasingly tech-savvy world now. It just means that more criminals can engage in this type of practice. Now, to a cyber criminal, they see this as extremely low risk. If they're careful, the chances of actually getting caught are really low. And you can see from the volumes of activity which are possible, the payoffs which are achievable there from those stats, that this is a scalable crime for these criminals. The thing that scares me the most, though, is they see this as a victimless crime. They think that stealing from a business, from an organization, they actually think it hurts nobody. They actually don't see the real people behind these businesses, whether it's a single individual, whether it's a group of 20 to 50 people running that business. You will get affected personally off the back of one of these attacks. So how do these attackers go about their business? Well, there's lots of different ways, and we're going to start off with the main entry point to cyber attacks, which is what we call social engineering. Now, social engineering in a nutshell is where somebody goes online and they will try to find out as much as they possibly can do about a business or a person, and then they're going to use that information against yourselves there. So this could be conning you into undertaking an action, it could be impersonating yourselves, and statistically what we've found is that from all cyber fraud that takes place, 88% start with this form of social engineering. I like to personally call it social stalking, because there is so much information about ourselves online nowadays. So it's not just social media platforms. This could be your business website, for example. So take, for example, somebody who might have a page which has an About Us page or a Meet the Team page. Think about the information we're actually putting out there in the first place. We're explaining who we are. We're explaining what we do as a business role within that organization, and sometimes even personal information. We do try to make it personable. And what we've got to realize is that information can then be used by these fraudsters. And as well, remember, we've got company's house, we've got directories, we've got news stories. So once this information is out there in the ether, it's easy for fraudsters to be able to get hold of this information. And we're not saying to yourselves, remove yourselves online at all. Just remain extremely cautious about the level of detail you actually post. And then remember, if someone does find out that you are individually linked up to a business, they may target you as well personally. So do remember your privacy settings on your social media as well. Make sure that only your friends, your family can see this type of information. Now, social engineering is not only just this bit of research that the force is going to do. There are other ways of being able to gather information from ourselves as well. So let's go through some of those in a few basic parts really, and just cover off what we can do to try and protect ourselves against these. So first of all, phishing emails. Probably 99% of people on this call today have probably experienced receiving a phishing email. So these are emails that appear to be from reputable companies. They've got a goal of influencing ourselves, of trying to gain personal information from ourselves there. So as you can see from the example here, what we're going to do is we're going to showcase you a phishing email and show you exactly what you can do to determine whether this is genuine or not, because it looks extremely realistic. I'm hoping that everyone on the call so far has spotted it's eBuy, not eBay. Okay, so what I would say to you is there are three main parts to this phishing email here that we should be checking. First of all is the sender information, the middle part is the content, and the bottom part is this link down below. So firstly, the sender information, where it says eBuy services at the top there. That part can actually say whatever it wants to say. So a fraudster can change that. It can say Barclays, it can say Apple, it can say Amazon. It's what's underneath there that matters to us. We need to find out exactly where this email has actually come from. So one simple way of doing that is either to hover over that name or to click on the name. It will not put you at risk at all. Okay, and that will tell you the exact email address underneath. So for example, if you were receiving an email from eBay, you might expect to say no reply at ebay.co.uk. If it's coming from a fraudster, it may say Nick Davies at phishingscam.com. Now, not that it would do, and I do not have that email address, by the way, everybody, so don't worry. Now, secondly, is the content. What you're going to find is that a lot of these emails actually originate from outside of the UK. So you're going to find their English is not that great always. So check for grammar, check for spelling. Does it sound right? And also, were you expecting this email in the first instance? And then finally, the holy grail for a fraudster is this link down below. Again, a fraudster can actually change this themselves. So this could say it's going to take us to anywhere. It could say it's going to take us to Barclays.co.uk. It could say it's going to take us to eBay.co.uk, wherever it wants to take us to. But that does not confirm exactly where it's actually going to take us to. And one thing we should be doing here is we should be hovering over this link. And what you're going to find, as soon as you hover over that link, is a little pop-up box underneath there, and in that pop-up box is the true location, the true destination details of where this link is going to take you to. So always do that first of all. And remember, one handy little tip is that most reputable organizations will never ever send you out a link in the first place to get you to your login page. They will tell you to go to your login page directly. So if you see an email like this, and it's asking you to click on this link to go to your login page, I would advise you to go directly to your login page yourself rather than clicking on the link. So that's a phishing email. Now, to the right-hand side of this page here, what you're also going to see is what we call a spear phishing email, a diagram of a spear phishing email. And a spear phishing email is slightly different because this is where it's targeting ourselves directly. And what you can see on the top part here is a fraudster has come up with a very simple process of coming up with an email address which is extremely similar to somebody within your organization. So in this case here, a gentleman by the name of David Smith. But if you look closely, once we've gone into the email sender information, we can see they've actually got their own email address, but added 2 T's in there. Okay, so it looks like it's somebody from within the organization. They are sending out documentation, which some people may be party to, others may not be. And unfortunately, what I am going to advise you now is that inside those documents there is some form of Trojan virus that we don't realize. Okay. And what the fraudster is going to do is they're going to send it around to every single individual within the organization, hoping that one person is going to be silly enough, really, to open up that document, even though it may not have been meant for them at all, even though they may not be part of that information. Sometimes we can be a little bit curious. We want to know what's come on that email, even though it was never meant for ourselves. So what I would say to yourselves, if you ever receive an email like this with information that you weren't expecting at all, first of all, check the sender information. Have a quick look at the email address to see where it's come from. If you can't determine whether it's come from somebody genuine or not, go around and see that person, ring them up, send them a direct email. Never reply to this email directly, and certainly do not open up those documents until you know they are safe to open. So, in a nutshell, that's phishing and spear phishing. But again, this is only a small part of social engineering. There are other ways that a fraudster is going to be able to use to try and get more information out of you. So as Alan rightly mentioned before as well, social media has become a massive thing. And one of the things that's hit off really, really well with individuals especially is the fact that we can now vent our dissatisfaction with organizations on social media. So, as you can see on this page here, we've got a nice little tweet. Hey, at Budget Airline UK, your gate at Manchester Airport should have opened 15 minutes ago. What's happening? Hashtag not good enough. On the basic look at that, it looks like a fairly innocuous tweet. Okay, it looks like, you know, of course I can't use much information on there at all, but actually if we look into a bit more detail, there's quite a lot of information here. So we know the individual, we know the budget airline they're using, we know it was at Manchester Airport, we also know the time of the date as well. So how can a social engineer use that information? Well, a basic Google search will come up with a fact that based on all that information, this was the actual flight number and the location that person was flying to. And this fraudster can send you a lovely email offering you a nice discount next time you fly, as well as a complimentary first-class upgrade, something that sounds too good to be true. Well, generally because it is. But it's certainly got our taste buds going there. Actually, we're thinking, okay, next time we fly out there, we might use this organization. And all we would need to do is click on this link down below to get our discounts. Well, again, we're falling into their trap. Nice and simple. What I would say to yourself, if you receive something off the back of a tweet or a Facebook post there, always check to see whether these are from reputable sources. Have a look at these websites, you know, from the organizations and find out their normal complaints procedure, find out their normal contact information. Would they send you information like this at all? Okay, if need be, directly call these organizations up. So that's being able to gather our information from social media. But again, it's still not the end. So let's go through a few more little things that the fraudster is going to be able to use to try and get information out of you. So the next one, a phone call. We call this phishing, and this is where somebody calls us on the phone. So yeah, fraudsters still use phones as well, and what they're going to do is they're going to ring you, and they're going to pretend to be from a bank, a credit card provider, somebody who you may hold some form of an account with, and they want to give you information about that account. Now, we don't know whether this is a genuine call or not, but they certainly sound genuine. In fact, they want to take you through a quick security check, so asking you your mother's maiden name, your date of birth, maybe the first line of your address. One very sneaky thing we're going to try and get out of ourselves here is they're going to ask us for our full password or our full PIN. Now remember that no reputable organization will ever ask that level of detail at all. Now, the one thing I do mention to all of my clients is that if you ever get a phone call from somebody pertaining to be an organization and you are one tiny little bit unsure, for peace of mind, put that phone down. Make sure that that line is dead, and more than likely you'll want to ring that organization to actually check it was them calling you. One thing to do, make sure that if you are going to call these organizations, that you've got a dialing tone first of all. It's been known that a fraudster can hang on the line. You think you've hung up, you take the phone away from your ear, you start dialing the organization you want to call, you put the phone back to your ear again, and you get straight through to that fraudster. and they're just going to then easily take all that information off you, including your password and your PIN information. So that's a phone call. And then, especially in the last 12 months, this is what we call a smishing attack, a text message alert attack, that's coming through from, again, large organizations, very similar to phishing emails, except coming via our phones instead. And these text messages, they look like they're from reputable companies. They contain information, again, that might say they're from these reputable companies, but unfortunately, there are areas on these text messages that we cannot check to determine whether these are genuine. So firstly, it says it's from Barclays, this text message. If I were to click on that name, there was no information underneath there, unfortunately, so I don't know it's come from Barclays. Secondly, this link down below here. Unfortunately, we can't hover over that link on our phones, so we don't know where that link is going to take us to. So the three basic rules about receiving a text message are, one, are you expecting a text message, and are you signed up to text message alerts with this organization? Remember, you can opt in and opt out of these services. Secondly, to read through the English, the grammar, the spelling on there to see, actually, does this sound genuine? And third and finally is that link down below again. Remember that no reputable organization would ever send you out a link via your text message at all. And then a very, very final thing we're going to talk about here on social engineering today is mobile bugs. So mobile malware, viruses. Now, computers, we all know, can receive viruses. But remember, mobile phones are just mini computers, sometimes even more powerful than most computers. And they can get infected as well. And an easy way to infect your phone there is by downloading an app which is actually not safe, which is not secure. So the key message here is to make sure that you download apps only from reputable sources. So if you've got an Apple phone or an Apple iPad, only buy your apps from the App Store, the Apple App Store. If you're an Android phone user, only buy them from a Google Play Store. And Microsoft have their own version, their own Microsoft Store as well. If you were to buy an app from a third-party site, you're putting yourself at risk. So, for example, this year when Pokemon Go came out, and I know you've probably all used Pokemon Go, you know, that was a massive thing this year, Pokemon Go was. And unfortunately, it came out in America 2 weeks before it did in Europe. Now, people in Europe want to get hold of that before anybody else did. So they went onto third-party sites to download this app. Unfortunately, they put themselves at risk, and they downloaded a malware called Hummingbird. And Hummingbird went onto their phones, infected their phones, and stole all their personal information from those phones, and also their login details to certain apps as well. So you're putting yourselves at risk. So that brings me to the end of social engineering. So the starting point to these fraudsters' attacks. So they've gathered information now.
Nick, just on a sort of footnote, really, you know, your example of somebody who tweets the budget airline. Well, the other thing, of course, the other thing they're doing is announcing that they're more than likely not at home, which is also not
exactly
a good idea.
That. It's not good at all. So yeah, just make sure that. I mean, we'll actually explain one of those examples later on where somebody was on holiday in Spain and that was used against them as well. So you'll see later on definitely, but it's massively important. You know, we pretty much post where we are nowadays. And there's some big names have been hit by this, unfortunately, when they've been out at, you know, massive meals or massive events that are going on. You know, lots and lots of money these individuals have, and when they've gone out of their house, the fraudsters have gone and broken in. So yeah, you're spot on there. Yeah. Fab. So yeah, so that brings me to the end of part one for ourselves here about social engineering. So we're going to move on to part two now, which is all about the cyber attacks themselves. I'm going to talk about the entry points of cyber attacks. And these are malware and passwords. So malware, short for malicious software, and it gives the fraudsters access to your systems. So through different methods, through different ways, it's a way of unlocking the digital defense of an organization. And as you can see here, that malware allows fraudsters access to personal info, account details, passwords, key login, mouse movement, you know, a plethora of different types of information that they want to use. And if we've never heard of the term malware before, you may have heard of viruses, Trojans, spyware, ransomware. They're all different guises. They've all got different jobs to do. And there's a few massive things here we should be considering. So the first thing is that removable storage devices become infected. And we will take USB sticks, USB pens, CDs, DVDs, and we'll transfer them between different systems. And one thing we don't always check is to see if we've inadvertently downloaded some form of malware. And it makes sense to have some form of scanner on your antivirus software that actually checks out your devices. Okay. Secondly, do not buy your removable storage devices from unknown sources. It's been known that people will buy them from well-known online auction sites. They've got themselves an absolute deal, 5 USB sticks or a tenner, for example. Now, do you know where those USB sticks are actually coming from? No, we don't. These could be coming from fraudsters who've already installed malware onto those devices. You've got them home, you've got an absolute deal on those USB sticks, and in fact, you've just put yourselves at risk there, personally or business. Now, on the previous slides, we also talked about embedded documents, links, and downloads. So, receiving emails with different styles of documents and downloads on there. Now, the general rule of thumb, again, I'm just going to reiterate this point, is if you do not know where these emails have come from, with this type of information on there, you do not open those emails whatsoever. If you know where they've come from, again, check the source. Have a quick look at the email address to make sure it actually is coming from that individual or that organization. And then finally, if need be, contact these people directly and find out actually are these okay for me to open. And the one final thing I will mention before I talk about virus infected networks is that we are only human, remember. Okay? We live busy lifestyles. We've got to sort out plans for ourselves. We need to make sure we're on track with certain things. And sometimes we might not do as many checks as we should be doing. So again, it makes sense that the antivirus software that you have in place actually runs as a live antivirus software as well. It's actually mopping up things in the background in case you make a mistake. And we do. I'll hold my hand up straight away. I've been infected before on my MacBook, okay, and it's making sure that we've got certain things that actually stop that from happening as well. And the final thing here is virus-infected networks. So the network that you will log on to every single morning, you and your staff, they can actually become infected. And once the network becomes infected, it can spread around every computer that is linked up to that network. So there's two things we need to consider here. The first one is to make sure that the antivirus software that we do use, as well as checking our computers, our software, and our hardware, actually scans our networks as well for us. And also, you will pay a premium to have a business network. So whether it's BT, whether it's O2, Virgin, EE, you will pay premium to have these networks in place for your business. So it's worthwhile to actually go back to these network providers and ask them, do you actually run any form of network checks yourselves at all? Some of these organizations do, so it makes sense to make the most of those. Okay, so always check your networks out as well. Now moving on to the front door keys to the organization, passwords. This is an even easier way to get in through a front door. And these are the top ways that a fraudster will use to try and get their password out of you. Okay, or trying to figure out your password. So the first one on the list is through deception. Somebody tricking you into revealing your password. Okay, so this could be certain questions they ask you to try and reveal certain information which will then give away your password. So always be extremely on guard if people are asking you personal questions or certain questions. Secondly, is a brute force attack, an automated effort to hack your password. Now, we've probably got the imagination ourselves here that we think a hacker is an individual sat at a computer trying to figure out our password. They are just typing through different combinations at a quick speed to try and figure out your password. But what have I told you? It could be one of those, but it could also be a warehouse full of computers, hundreds of these things, all programmed to go through your passwords, try and figure out your passwords. These are called botnets or bots. And remember, these are better than humans because they don't just attack you, they can attack hundreds of thousands of other people as well, and they can go for 24 hours a day. Okay? And these brute force attacks, what they will do is they'll go through a combination of different styles of attacks. So they can go through what we call social engineering attacks. They can figure out your passwords based on your personal information that they've gathered from you, so partners' names, children's names, telephone numbers, date of births, allegiances to football teams. Fairly simple information we can try and gather. Secondly, they will go through an attack called a dictionary attack. And this is where they can go through any dictionary they want to in a matter of seconds to try and figure out your password. So you imagine the Oxford English Dictionary, how many thousands of words are in that dictionary? Well, that's pre-populated into their systems, and they can just go through every single word in that system to try and figure out your password. Then finally, they will probably go through a list of the top 500 most common passwords available. You can find that yourselves as well. If you were to Google top 500 most common passwords, you can find a list of those passwords yourself. So if anyone is using these top 4 passwords now, I would advise you change them. So QWERTY is number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is number 3. password is number 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is number 1. So it makes sense to have a really strong password policy in place.
Nick?
And what I would say, yep, sorry,
Yeah,
Alan.
so just a question then. So say I've got a really complicated password, lots of letters, they don't necessarily make a lot of sense, so random letters, symbols and numbers, really good combination, really strong password. Can I use that on lots of different accounts?
You can do, but I would not advise it. Okay, because once they figure out one password, they're going to try every other type of password they want to, try and figure out as well. So they'll, a lot of people tend to use the same password for a lot of things. So once one's gone, they're going to try other areas for you as well.
Okay.
Okay. So it makes sense to have a really long password as possible. It makes sense to mix the letters up, mix numbers up in there, upper lowercase letters in there as well. Also, another handy little tip is using what we call a passphrase instead of a password. So randomly picking 2 or 3 words and putting them into one word. So 1, you're not going to find it in a dictionary at all. And 2, it's going to make it highly unlikely for an attacker to be able to guess that combination of those words in that order. Okay. And one little tip that my actual girlfriend gave to me recently is, again, these attackers come from outside of the UK. So it makes sense to put something in there that they actually don't have on their systems, such as a pound sign. Okay. So handy little tip there for yourselves. Now, the next attack we're going to look at is what we call spyware. So this is a form of malware. It's recording you logging in. So it can either watch you through your webcam, or they can track your keystrokes on your computer, as we mentioned before. So every time you type a letter in your keyboard, they can see it at their end. So this makes sense to have an extra add-on, anti-spyware software inbuilt into your antivirus software. Not every package includes that. So do go away and do check your antivirus systems and make sure you've got an anti-spyware software inbuilt into that. If not, add the add-on as well. And then the final thing I am going to mention here is shoulder surfing. So this is a really old school method. So this is literally just somebody stood behind you watching you logging in. Now, for years, we've taken all due care and attention when it comes to logging into an ATM machine or using a card on a card machine. We make sure that people who are behind us, they cannot see us typing our PIN in. But when it comes to our phones or our laptops in public places, I don't think we've got the same consideration. And in fact, you've probably got more information on your phone than you have done on your debit card there. So be extremely cautious about who is behind you when you're logging into your systems, whether this is out in the public or even at work. Attacks do happen from the inside as well. I hate to mention that, but it is the case. So they're the entry points to cyber attacks. So nice, easy way of getting into the systems there, either through malware that's implemented into our systems or passwords. Okay, getting into our systems the easy way. So we're going to actually talk about the attacks themselves now. So the first one I want to cover off with yourselves today here is what we call ransomware. And ransomware it's been dubbed the attack of 2016. So it's been rising through the ranks massively this year, and it's a form of malicious software. So we've just been chatting about malware a moment ago. And it actually allows cyber criminals the ability to lock your computer from a remote location. They can be anywhere in the world and lock your computer or lock your files. And what you will see is a little pop-up window. It displays in front of you and it tells you that they've locked your computer and that they will give you access back to your computer if you pay them some money. So they're holding you to ransom. Okay, quite scary, this one. And these ransomware criminals, we now actually call them ransomware brands. This is how large these organizations are. Okay, so as it mentions there, the fastest growing form of computer malware out there. Now these organizations run an extremely slick organization. So they are going to ask you not to pay them with sterling or euros or dollars at all, because remember, that's traceable money. They want to be untraceable. And the only untraceable source of the money out there are virtual currencies, such as bitcoins. Now, if somebody came up to me, if a fraudster said to me, Nick, I've locked your computer, I want you to pay me 1 bitcoin, and a bitcoin, by the way, is a legal tender. At the moment, it's worth around, I think it's just shy of £600 for 1 bitcoin at the moment. I wouldn't have a clue how to buy one of these bitcoins. But that doesn't bother the cyber criminal at all, because these organizations actually have their own customer service teams. They will contact you. They'll walk you through a process of buying these virtual currencies, and then they'll walk you through a process of actually paying them with these virtual currencies. So exceptional customer service. And the reason why they do that, obviously they want to get paid. But remember, there is still no guarantee that these criminal organizations are going to give you access back to your computer. They could simply keep it locked. They could simply just delete everything that's on your file. So we advise here never, ever sort of pay these ransomware criminals. It might seem the easy way out of just paying them, but we still remember there's no guarantee. So there's a couple of things we need to consider here. The first one is making sure we've got the relevant security in place to try and stop these things from happening. So I mentioned before having a live antivirus / anti-spyware software in place, running in the background at all times, keeping an eye on us. But probably the most important thing here is having what we call a business continuity plan. It's getting you back to the position that you were in the moment before you were attacked in the least time possible with the least detriment to your business. Okay? And it's knowing who to go to, who can you contact to get in, to sort your IT systems out so that it doesn't affect your business at all. And secondly as well is making sure we've got all our data backed up safely. And I would have a two-pronged method here. I'd have some form of server or online cloud-based software that backs up all our data and encrypts it online. And secondly, having a backup of a backup. So having a hard version, a USB stick or a hard drive with that data on as well, which is removed away from a computer. Okay? And like I say, it makes sense that we can contact somebody, get them in, get our data back again, and get the business back up and running again for yourselves. So that's ransomware. Extremely scary. And that's been growing throughout the year. Now, the next attack we're going to talk about is what we call a man-in-the-middle attack. And this will probably affect everybody in the room here. And this is where the attacker can intercept the network that you're on and watch the transactions that happen between the two parties. So more than likely, a lot of people in this room today will use free Wi-Fi or public Wi-Fi, whether this be in a coffee shop, in a restaurant, in a pub, in a hotel, UK or abroad. And I'm going to give you an analogy of going into a coffee shop here. So I'm going to give you an example of how this works. So, for example, we go into a coffee shop, we order a coffee, we sit down, we think we want to go online. Now, either we don't want to use our data or we have no signal, so we hook up to the free Wi-Fi that's available in the coffee shop. So, for example, the cloud. So we sign up, we do some browsing, we send some emails, we go onto our social media platforms, and we finish our coffee, we leave the premises. Now, when we go back to that premises again in the future, automatically our phone hooks up to that free Wi-Fi again. Or so we think it does. So what an attacker can actually do is they can sit inside that coffee shop, they can set up their own network, they can call it the cloud. When you walk back into that premises again in the future, your phone is only looking out for the name of the network. That is all. So if it sees two versions of the cloud in front of it, you've got a 50-50 chance. One, you might hook up to the coffee shops, or alternatively, you might actually hook up to the attackers and they can just watch everything that you're doing. They can screen grab, they can take copies of everywhere you're going. So it makes sense to really be safe when we're using these different networks. So not just free and public Wi-Fi, but also using customers' networks as well. So the first thing I will say is the most obvious choice is to not use free Wi-Fi or public Wi-Fi, but that is an extreme measure. One thing I would say to yourself is use it safely. So when you walk into that premises, check if you're on the right network. If you're unsure, go and see a staff member. They'll be able to advise you which is the correct one. Secondly, use it for browsing purposes only. So never do anything that's important or confidential for yourselves. So there's two options here we can do if we need to send anything important. So the first one is to use your 3G or your 4G on your phone, and you can even tether your laptop up to that if you need to. But more importantly is investing in what we call a virtual private network, a VPN for short, something that will encrypt all of your information, all of your data, okay, and effectively put you in a secure bubble. So if anyone is actually trying to watch you at all, they can't see anything. They can see gobbledygook. And you can go about your business in a safe way, knowing that nobody can actually see what you're typing there. Now, these virtual private networks are fairly inexpensive. You're looking at £4, £5, £6 a month for these types of networks. Really, really handy to have. So that's a man-in-the-middle attack. And the third attack we're going to talk about here today is anybody who's got a website. And it's what we call a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service attack. And this is where an attacker is overwhelming our servers to try and take our website down. Okay, so effectively what they're doing is they're throwing lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of traffic at your website until it can't cope anymore. It buckles underneath the sheer weight of traffic. So to give you an analogy of something you may have experienced which is similar to this is when you've gone on a ticketing website before. Too many people are trying to buy tickets all at once and the website goes down. Very similar to a DDoS attack. Now, these attackers can be anybody. They can be people who just decide they want to attack a website. They can be ex-employees. They can be competitors. They can be disgruntled customers. These attacks are fairly inexpensive to buy online if you know the right places to go. Now, there's only one way of actually telling whether you're under attack or not with a DDoS attack, and that's by actually looking at your traffic sources. So, for example, if you're receiving, on average, 10, 20 people an hour through your website, and all of a sudden you see 5,000 people on your website, one of two things has happened. One, your marketing team done a really good job that day, okay, and got loads of people to come onto your website. Or two, more than likely, you're under attack. And the one thing to do here is to pull your website off a server straight away, so it does not get damaged, okay? If you've got a spare server, move over to the other server, okay? Or alternatively, just pull it from there so it does not get damaged, and make sure as well that you've got your website backed up. Now, it may be the case where your website is run by a third-party company, so it makes sense to actually go back to that third-party company and say to them, do you run any form of diagnostic checks to make sure that I'm not under attack from a DDoS attack? And what would you do if this were to happen? And have you got a backup of my website? So again, thinking about business continuity, about keeping your business safe and your website safe. So they're the most common types of attacks we've seen in 2016. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to move on to some more business-orientated attacks. We're actually going to directly target you. And these are invoice admin-style attacks. And what I'm going to mention to yourself here is that I think in today's digital age, we've lost really the art of conversing a little bit. I think we need to start talking with each other a little bit more. And so the reason why I say this is to try and save you money, try and save you from getting attacked. So the first attack that I want to cover off today with yourself is what we call CEO fraud, CEO impersonation. And what you can see in front of you here is an example. Now, this is actually a real email. Yes, we've changed numbers on here and details and the actual name of the organization. But CEO fraud or CEO impersonation is when an employee within your organization receives an email from somebody higher up within the organization asking them to make a payment. So in this case here, you can see that Tracy's received an email from John Smith asking her to send a payment of £453,000. And yes, I did say that right, £453,000. This is a true example. And she was asked to drop everything at once to make sure this was extremely confidential and get this payment through straight away. So let me give you a bit of background about how good this attack was. So we saw the stat before about 231 days before you've been hacked. Well, it's because the attacker was actually hiding in the background on this one, and they were watching everything that happened. So they knew that John Smith was the executive chairman of a company. They came up with an email address extremely similar to John Smith's. They knew the head of the accounts team, Tracy, so any large payments actually go through her. They sent this on a Friday afternoon. They also knew the second level authorization process to get through, and finally, they also knew that the language that was used by John in his email. So they'd pretty much come up with an email that sounded like him. Extremely good, fraud this one is. And it pains me to say this, but, extremely detailed in their method. And this was extremely successful. As soon as Tracy received that email, she acted on it straight away. She sent out £453,000. Didn't realise, and unfortunately, that organisation lost all that money. That's a massive amount of money. And of course, this was a large organisation with lots of cash, but I've also known it where a business has had two people within the business sat across from each other at a desk. One of them gets an email from the other person literally meters away from them. Send £20,000 to this organisation. And I told you before, we've lost the art of conversing. We don't really chat to anyone anymore. Well, that person did not even lift their head and shout across the table to make sure this was okay to send. They just sent a payment. Now, luckily for them, Barclays stopped it and picked it up, okay, before it was too late. But they were the lucky ones. So what I would say to yourself is, if you ever receive an email like this from somebody within the organisation, or if there's people within your organisation who receive emails from you, put some form of second level authorization in place. Never reply directly to this email. Send a brand new email if need be. But what I would say is more than likely you should be doing is to walk around a corner and knock on a door, or pick up a phone and ring their direct telephone number, never the contact details that are provided on screen there, okay? Or even lift your head up on your desk and just shout across the room, okay? I promise you that by putting these second checks in place now, you're going to save a hassle in the future of trying to sort out, these fraudulent attacks from happening. So that's CEO fraud or CEO impersonation. Now, we're going to move on to the biggest one here, and it's something that Alan mentioned before, invoice fraud. So, as Alan rightly mentioned, this has cost SMEs £9 billion in the last year. This is a huge attack. And unfortunately, you are not covered by your bank in these sense of these attacks, because what's happening here is you are receiving an email, a letter, a fax, even a phone call from an organization pertaining to be one of your suppliers, one of somebody who you might pay regularly. And they're telling you that either they've changed their account details, so any future payments need to be sent here, or we've got a new invoice that's attached onto this email with new account details. When the email comes through to yourself, it looks extremely realistic. It looks exactly the same as your normal invoice emails or normal emails you receive from these organizations. And what most people do is they take it in part and parcel and just send those payments out straight away. But we should not be doing that. We should be second checking these things again. And my main tip here is to actually have a list of direct contacts for these organizations, for your suppliers, your customers, whatever, and just if you receive something like this, is second checking it. Because again, 5 minutes checking something out on a phone call is going to stand you in good stead in the future. It means you're not going to have to run around, chase around, see if you can get some money back off the back of these emails or letters. Okay, and the main thing about this is these fraudsters do not care. Okay, and I only reiterate this. So, these telephone numbers, these email addresses are the fraudster's information. Even if you were to ring them, you're going to speak to the fraudster, because do you actually speak to these people on a regular basis? Do you know what their voices sound like? Probably not. So put your second checks in place, and just to make sure that you are checking these things out, make sure they are genuine. I would probably say to you, definitely speak to these people on their phone. And then the very, very final attack I'm going to cover off here today with yourselves is this attack here, and it's check fraud. And I know this does not sound very cybery at all, but this is very, very sneaky by the fraudsters. So with banks nowadays, if you go into an actual branch of a bank, you will find that there are less and less staff, unfortunately, but there are more and more machines. And you can pay your cash, your checks, you can make electronic transfers on these self-service machines. Now, fraudsters have cottoned onto this, and what they've been doing is they're going to these self-service machines. They already know your account details, by the way, so they know your sort code and account number, and they place a check into your account. And what they're going to do is they're going to change the narrative that shows on your statement. So this part here where it says wire transfer shamesy. So they can change that to whatever they want to. That can say wire transfer, that can say electronic transfer. It can say anything that might make you think it's an electronic transfer. And what they're doing is they're telling you one of two things. They're going to ring you up, and they're going to say to you, excuse me, one, I've accidentally sent a transfer to your account. It was never meant for you. Apologize. Please can you refund me that back ASAP? I need it to send to one of my customers or one of my suppliers or whatever. Or alternatively, it could be a service that they've asked from for you, so a service or a product, but they've overpaid you. So the service from you was £300. They've accidentally sent you £3,000. So keep hold of £300, refund me £2,700. I need it again ASAP, please. And what you'll do is you'll go away and you'll check your account and you'll see wire transfer, £3,000. And you didn't realize it was actually a check. And so you refund that person that amount of money. Now, checks, if everyone realized, actually do take 5 working days to clear. So if it gets placed into your account one day, it's going to be nearly a week before it actually clears in your account. And then 5 days down the line, the check bounces, and you're out of all that money. And by then, the fraudster is long gone. So what I would say to yourselves here in the room is be on the lookout for any unexplained or unexpected credits into your account. Make sure that funds are actually cleared before you actually deliver any goods, provide any services. Don't ever be fooled by the narrative. It doesn't mean that funds are actually cleared. Okay, just because it says wire transfer does not mean it's a wire transfer. And then finally, never pay any refunds to somebody against uncleared funds. So if you do a daily reconciliation of your accounts there, that will tell you what's cleared and what's not cleared. But if you're in doubt, you pick up the phone to your bank and you speak to them. Now, I can't talk to you about any other banks outside there, but definitely with Barclays, one thing we can check is whether something is a check or not, just by this little sign here, this little U next to a transaction. Unfortunately, that's not available to most bankers, most people's online banking. Okay, but banks can also tell you a lot more detail. They can tell you when it was paid in, they can tell you the time it was paid in at, they can tell you the location it was paid in at, and they can also tell you the date it's supposedly going to clear by. So it does turn out that it's a check, and it's supposedly going to clear by the 23rd. Then what would you do? You would wait until the 24th before ever issuing any form of refund against that. Now, what you are going to find at the back of these fraudsters is they are very, should we say, headstrong. They will batter the door until they get their money back. But remember, who's in a position of power? You are. You've got the money. They want the money. So this is where you simply say no and put that phone down. So that brings me to the end of part 2. And we're going to move on to the third and final part in a moment. And this is all about what we can do as an organization and what's available out there to us as businesses. So first of all, the 10 steps to cybersecurity, some basic guidance. So this is a handy little 10-step guide for you to go through to cover off areas that you may not have ever considered before, but it's covered off everything I've gone through on the call today. But I think the 2 most important things, yes, you've got all this, IT software down below in the bottom 8 things, but the 2 most important things are user education, making sure that all staff, all employees are educated no matter what level or role they're in. Then secondly is incident management. What do people need to do if a certain attack were to happen? Okay, what is the business continuity plan to get ourselves back in that position we were in before? Now, of course, if you do these 10 things, I can never promise you that you will not get attacked, but it will certainly lessen the risk if you get attacked or the actual attack itself. Now, the statement below at the bottom, all that's saying to yourselves there is that, this is not a comprehensive guide at all. So it makes sense to bring in cybersecurity professionals every now and then to regularly test your systems out. Now, the next slide actually runs hand in hand with this. And this is anyone who has a website with e-commerce systems. And this is a 10-step guide really to make sure that you're ticking all the boxes in terms of taking payments online, about keeping your systems up to date and safe. Okay, so that if anyone is going to be making payments, any of your customers are going to be making payments at all, then they are extremely safe from providing their details online. And this is a 10-step guide based on the cost involved, the ease of setting these things up, and also the risk mitigation, what it's going to stop as well. Okay, and we've included a handy link here to the PCI security standards policy there. Okay, so to make sure that you are completely compliant if you are selling online at all. Now, what extra support is out there available for yourselves here? So we've been working close with this organisation, CERT UK, and these guys have changed their name recently to the National Cybersecurity Centre. Unfortunately, not changed their logo, but they work towards enhancing UK cyber resilience. Now, these guys have created a great initiative called the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Partnership, CISP for short. And it's a joint industry and government initiative to share cyber threats, cyber attacks, vulnerability information in real time. So it's a website that you as businesses can go on and have a look at what type of industry you are in and see what types of attacks are happening against your industry. So then you can, increase your overall situation awareness of these attacks and put things in place to reduce these attacks from happening in the future against yourselves. Now that's a completely free service to use, by the way. And then you've got this organisation down below, Cyber Essentials. Now, these guys have got a really great website, which I've got a link to all these, by the way, at the end for you, okay? But Cyber Essentials have a great website, lots of free resources. But also for a fee, they will also run resilience checks for yourselves as well, okay? So this can range anywhere between £200 all the way up to £3,000, depending on the size of your organisation, depending on the types of checks you have done. But they will check out your security systems out for you, let you know how good, or if there's any areas of improvement, they will let you know as well. Okay, so really, really worthwhile looking into that as well. And there are other organisations who do those types of checks as well. And one thing I will mention to yourself, if it's not on this slideshow, is all about insurance. Okay, covering yourselves if you were to get attacked. Okay, obviously working for a bank, I can't really make any recommendations around insurance at all. Okay, we all remember the PPI scandal, but it's worthwhile investing in that, looking into that to see what would get covered if you were to get attacked. And then finally for yourselves here, I've included a really handy page with lots of little bits and bobs for yourself to have a look at, to try and educate yourselves a little bit more, okay, to, the things I've talked about in the previous slides there, do read through these slides there for you. Now, I've left the Barclays corporate videos on there because these videos are actually really useful. Okay, so these are fraud videos available to anybody and everybody, and it's explaining different types of social engineering fraud. So they are, 2-3 minute videos to watch for yourselves there. You've also got the police. Any cyber attack, you let them know. And then what I would say to yourselves here, if you want to join CIS or look at Cyber Essentials, you've got these 2 links here as well, the ncsc.gov.uk and Cyber Streetwise Cyber Essentials. So that brings me to the end of the talk. So Alan.
Yeah, Nick, thank you.
We're going to open up for questions, I think.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things I'm going to take away from that is that cybersecurity is not an IT issue. It is everybody has to take, I think, personal responsibility when it comes to their own safety online. I think it's a sort of comment and question here from Jeff. He's saying banks don't check signatures anymore. And he's asking why. So is that something that he's observed, or have you come across that as well?
Myself personally, I've not come across it at all because I don't work on that sort of part. But I can certainly go away, Jeff, and try and find out the answers for you if need be. I always thought there was a certain procedure in place where signatures are still checked on the systems. But I've been out of the normal banking game probably the last 2.5 years now. So it's certainly something I could go away and find out for yourself, Jeff.
Okay. By the way, if you have questions, there's a little button that looks like a hand. Hit that. That tells us you want to ask a question, and we can come to you. William, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it. What's your question?
Hi, William.
Hi, Nick. Nick, I have a couple of questions. One of them I think you have answered, but just something to check. All this business. What do I do if I think I have been, infected or attacked, and how can I prepare myself for an attack? Because from what you've said, it's almost bound to happen. You mentioned having a good backup regime, and you mentioned having firewalls and malware detectors and things like that in place, which I think most people would have. Is there anything else that I should consider?
No, I just think it's remain extremely vigilant. So as long as you've got the relevant IT systems in place, if you, as a business or an organisation, it does make sense having third-party companies that do check your systems out for you, because, we as businesses are very, very busy. So how can we keep an eye on that all the time? And yes, it might be a little bit of extra expense to yourselves there, but it's worthwhile actually investing there sometimes and going to those organisations saying, right, would you be my direct contact if I were to get attacked? How quickly can you get in to see me and try and sort my systems out for me? Okay, but if not, then, like you say, is making sure you've got business continuity plans in place. It's making sure that you've got your data backed up, and also I would say to you as well, it's regularly update and check your systems. I think it can be a bit of a bugbear for a lot of people, William. In updating. Certain software all the time, certain hardware all the time. It can be a bit of a pain in the bum, can't it, really? Okay, but it makes sense because a lot of the time these updates, they include patches that will improve security or will make sure they're stopping against certain viruses or certain attacks from happening. And even on mobile phones as well. So if you're an iPhone user, for example, or an Android phone user, every time you get an update through, it makes sense to actually update them straight away, because sometimes your security is actually inbuilt in the background on the phones as well.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And a second question, if I may, what can be done? Is there anything more that can be done to sort of turn the tables on the bad guys? Because it seems to be that as a user of IT kit and application software, I'm almost under continual attack, or people trying to infect me or phish and get information, but there doesn't seem to be anything that you can do to respond to that, which I find personally a bit frustrating. Never really hear of people being caught, except for the high level cases of people being caught hacking into Department of Defense computers and being extradited to America, but there doesn't seem to be anything else.
It never really happens, does it, at all, William? That's the main concern here, is that you see all these cases online, and on the news about all these attacks happening, but actually you don't really hear about anybody actually getting caught off the back of it. And there are organisations out there, so we've been working closely with the police ourselves, and the police have their own teams around the country called ROCUs. And these ROCUs are set up to try and combat cybersecurity in local areas. Okay, so there'll be one in sort of, in Norfolk and Anglia as well there, that we speak to directly, and they actually provide us with relevant information and they tell us what they're doing. There's also organisations out there. In fact, my last customer I spoke to before this call, he's a cybersecurity expert himself, and he's a bit of a charity, and he goes around and as a business as well, they offer checks where they will test out your staff for you. And what they do is they will send out emails to see who would open up emails, to then you will know who the weak links are within your organisation as well. So there's certain different organisations out there trying to combat it, but whether it's been successful at the moment is another thing entirely, William. Okay? So, yeah. So it's a shame, but I think we've just got to remain extremely vigilant as people and make sure we've got a strict sort of, it sounds quite bad, but a regime in place to say this is what we should be doing, okay?
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, William.
No worries.
Thanks, Nick. So just final couple of minutes, final call for any questions. Question here from Mike, saying that are there any required accreditations or quality standards? You mentioned about some of those accreditations, but they're not mandatory, are they? And if you're actually providing, cybersecurity advice and those services, you don't necessarily know who you're dealing with, do you? Because they haven't got those accreditations in place. So how can you protect yourself there? There's presumably certain questions that you need to be asking, and that will give you confidence in who you're dealing with.
It's exactly that. It's either, finding out if you're going to be dealing with other organisations out there, there's certain procedures in place. If you don't like those procedures, then I would probably implement them yourself, just to make sure that, you are covering your back if something were to happen. I mean, a lot of people nowadays, for example, don't like receiving checks in the normal banking world because of the fact they take 5 working days and stuff like that, and also they're not that safe if they were to bounce. Obviously, people want to receive payments into their system, but I think the main thing here is going back to this slide here about the Cyber Essentials. This is a nationally recognised certificate, okay, and this, I think that the plan for this is that this is going to be rolled out eventually so that everybody's got to have it, okay, and it's going to go on your website and say, right, we've done this to say that we are safe, so that when you go to deal with these people, you can see that certificate on their site and say, actually, that's the type of person or organisation I should be dealing with because they are safe, I'm safe, and we should work in partnership.
Mm-hmm. So we can expect a change in the law coming soon then?
Definitely.
Okay, Nick, thank you very much. Just a final message here from Jeff. He's at a dash, but he says thanks very much. Excellent advice. Thank you very much, Nick. If you want to take this presentation, it is available as a handout. You just have to drag it into your own work area. If you don't have time to do that right now, don't worry, I'll send it all out later on. So I think that's just about it from us. So we will be back next year with some more webinars. If you want to get your suggestions in, if you've got any particular topics that you really want us to cover, then feel free to contact us. We're at newangliagrowthhub.co.uk or at growthhub@newanglia.co.uk. That's our email address. So that is just about it from us. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you very much, everybody, as well, for joining today. Really appreciate it.
Take care. Goodbye.
See you later, everybody.